Baylor AD Mack Rhoades is taking a leave of absence after an internal investigation into Rhoades allegedly confronting tight end Michael Trigg over the type of undershirt that he was wearing against Arizona State, that per our own Ross Dellinger. Rhoades serves as the CFP chair. He's also stepping away from the committee. What does that mean? That means that his seat with the committee had to be replaced as well as the responsibility of being the committee chair. That's all now official. So we know that he's being replaced by Utah Athletic Director Mark Harlan, and then Arkansas Athletic Director Hunter Yurachek will now serve as the chair. Caroline, I cannot stress enough how important this should be to college football fans, because frankly, imagine if we were sitting there and we'd had weeks of debate over the best pizza, and all of a sudden the person that's in the room, one of the voters in the room, changes, and the new person that comes in is like, hey guys, what about Detroit-style pizza? And the whole room hadn't really thought about that, but now all of a sudden you have a wrinkle. There's only 13 members in a committee. One change to a member at this point in the season could force, like, we don't know, does this guy value the eye test? Does this guy value, is he going to value analytics? Does he think they're doing the whole thing wrong? Is he going to challenge thought processes differently? Like, we genuinely don't know what to expect when you change somebody in the committee. It can change the entire tone of the conversation for everybody that votes.
And I think that it should, right? Because that's the beauty of having humans on the college football playoff committee. That's the beauty of having, human perspective and nuance in this conversation. And if you have a new person with different perspectives, different biases, different things that he or she might prioritize, then that should change the process. But I would not be surprised if we start to see some sort of shakeup. Maybe not necessarily at the top, but I think where you really start to see what the committee values is kind of in that mucky middle, right? In like the 6 to 10 or the 8 to 12 kind of area. And 8 to 12, that's a massive difference. Because if you're ranked 12th in the college football playoff rankings, you're probably not making the college football playoff due to bid thieves. So that could be the difference of a team making it and not making it, or, home field advantage in the playoffs versus not having home field advantage in the playoffs. So this change, under a microscope could be massive. It could be a huge difference. But it kind of just brings up the overall point that I have and have always had and will continue to repeat until anybody can listen to me. And that is, I don't think any active and sitting athletic director should be on the college football playoff committee. Doesn't that feel a little icky? Somebody with an active and legitimate rooting interest into the college football playoff is making decisions of who gets into the college football playoff. Like that feels gross to me. You shouldn't have an active rooting interest and investment into the playoff and be deciding who gets into the playoffs.
Playoffs. No, to your point, and I think this is important. A lot of people may not realize that when you receive any compensation from a school, or any family member receives any compensation from a school, you are recused from a vote. So what happens is anybody, if they're voting, the way the voting works is they take the first 3 teams, and then they take the next 3 teams, right? And then they'll go in and they'll re-debate number 3 versus number 4. This is how they do. Everything's done in groups of 3, and then they re-debate the last and the highest. So sometimes you can end up, in past years, you've ended up with as many as 5 or 6 people from a 13 member committee having to recuse themselves from a vote. So you'll have 6 or 7 people total responsible for this vote now, because people have to walk out of the room. You have to walk out of the room completely, right? But even imagine if Caroline and I are on a committee and it's like, okay, you guys are voting about Yahoo Sports Daily. We'll leave the room. Do you believe that the rest of the room isn't going to feel some kind of way knowing that we have to walk back in the room and then find out where you voted for the team this interest that we have? So you're 1,000% right. That's where this gets really complicated, is that you've got sitting athletic directors that are going to have to leave the room. And then sometimes there's questions of, well, how do they feel about their conference? And how do they feel about other conferences? How do they feel about SEC or Big Ten bias, or all these things that we talk about? Like, it's so complicated. I agree with you 1,000%. And I think it does throw total chaos into this year's committee. We'll know when we get through the course of the Tuesday. We'll know if much has changed. I agree with you also. I don't think necessarily we'll see a top change in the top 3, but I also don't know. Like, what if this new committee feels like one member having a change in analytics? As we said earlier, 2 voters, if 2 voters for the AL MVP would have changed their votes from first and second, if they would have simply flip-flopped first and second, 2 voters, we would have had a tie for AL MVP. So who knows what change this will have.
The other thing, too, important to point out, and when we talk about, biases, Hunter Yurachek is looking for a new head coach. I would have to believe that Hunter Yurachek is looking at the head coaches of some of these programs that are in contention for the college football playoffs. So let's take John Sumrall at Tulane, for example. I'm sure he's on the coaching hot board at Arkansas. How does that affect the way that Hunter Yurachek views Tulane and the group of 5 in this conversation? Like, just because Hunter Yurachek isn't actively getting money from Tulane doesn't mean that he's not going to feel some way about Tulane. I know that's just one example, but maybe Hunter Yurachek looks at it and like, look, I don't want to have to wait until January to hire my next head coach. It would be great if Tulane didn't make the playoffs. Or I want my next head coach to be fresh off the playoffs. So I'd love to, give Tulane a little bit of something. I'm using, an anecdote and an example. I'm not saying that Hunter Yurachek has that bias. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying John Sumrall is going to be the next head coach at Arkansas. I'm just using that as an example of how, being an active sitting athletic director will fuel the way that you vote for some of these teams.
All right, so let's take a look as we brace for Tuesday on some of the action we're going to get this weekend and what it could mean for Tuesday's committee. Playoff hopes could be dashed. Texas UGA, Texas Georgia, one of the big games. What do you think? We got playoff hopes dashed for Texas in this game?
1000%. Texas is not headed to the CFP. They will get their 3rd loss of the season against Georgia, and I think that's maybe the easiest bet of the weekend. Georgia doesn't lose in Athens to any team not named Alabama. Gunnar Stockton is playing at an incredibly high level. Georgia's run game is only getting better. Georgia's defense is going to throw things at Arch Manning to totally and completely confuse him. I think that Texas falls out of the playoff race this weekend.
There is not a world where I would sit on committee and I would say Texas was ever the 10th best team in the country. They're going to show that over the course of the weekend, and they will do what college football does. They'll take care of their own mess. It'll get out of the way of the college football playoff conversation. I do think this game's interesting. Number 21, Iowa. Stop rolling your eyes, everybody. At number 17, USC. Stop rolling your eyes, everybody. This is a big one because USC does have enough ammunition left. I said this the other day, but if you look at what their schedule has in front of them, they have enough quality opponents left that they could play their way into the college football playoff conversation. And Iowa at 21 from the committee is giving some level of the committee is saying, hey, we believe this is a good football team. USC could roll here and end Iowa's hopes, and in doing so, even help their own.
Yeah, I mean, USC right now, they're only a 2-loss team, and they could be the beneficiary of some of these other 2-loss teams losing out. And right now, if the season ends today, USC would be 3rd in the Big Ten. They would miss out on the Big Ten championship. If I'm Lincoln Riley, that's the best possible scenario. We'll let Indiana and Ohio State beat up on each other in the Big Ten championship game, and then we'll just go ahead and cruise into the playoffs. But you have to beat Iowa in order to do that. This version and this iteration of USC is different than any other Lincoln Riley team throughout everything that you know about USC, because this team, they want to run the football. King Miller is, I think, one of the most under-talked about running backs in college football right now. I mean, like, USC was able to beat Michigan the way that Michigan wants to win football games. Playing defense, playing tough at the line of scrimmage, and running the football. USC out-Michiganed Michigan. Now, that's the formula for beating Iowa. USC can do that against Michigan. I don't think that USC can do that against Iowa. This kind of feels like a battle of cultures and a battle of style. Well, if you culture on culture, I'll probably take Iowa when it comes to culture in any given game, in any given matchup. So I actually think that while USC right now has a path to the playoff, I think that gets totally foiled against Iowa this weekend at home.
I think they win this weekend, but then it gets foiled in a week when they have to take on Oregon. That won't be pretty for them. One more real quickly in. Oklahoma, Alabama. Number 11, Oklahoma. Number 4, Alabama. This has to be the time that we stop talking about Oklahoma, too, right? Like, this just feels like the death punch is like, finish him, and that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I think Alabama is going to win by at least a touchdown, if not more. Look, Oklahoma's a good football team. They're not a great football team. Alabama's a great football team. Oklahoma's been good on the road, but they went on the road and beat Tennessee, and because Tennessee made a bunch of mistakes and Oklahoma was just able to capitalize off of them. I don't think Oklahoma did anything, particularly over the top or wonderful in order to beat Tennessee. Alabama's not going to make those same mistakes that Tennessee did. And I think that Alabama's going to be able to pick apart that Oklahoma Oklahoma secondary. I think that this is going to be a big day for Ty Simpson. If it's going to be pound for pound and throw for throw, I'll take Ty Simpson over John Mateer any day of the week. So I think Alabama's going to roll on this one. No pun intended.
Yeah, which is going to make it really interesting because so far we have some top 10-ish teams in Texas and Oklahoma. We have them losing. That's going to put them in the situation with their number 11 and 12 in the playoffs. So let's see what the committee thinks because there's more opportunity for chaos to come on Tuesday.